DPR Motorsport set up the race centre at Brands Hatch for 2 days testing ahead of the final weekend's racing of the 2019 championships. In what's turning out to be a bit of a tradition for the championship deciders, the weather was all over the place through testing and the weekend. This all adds to the drivers' nerves, but it does mean you have to be a good all-rounder to score well. After an almost completely dry season, some drivers were relishing the challenge more than others. The DPR Motorsport awning was busier than ever for this final round, with Ian Sparshot, Nilesh Palmer and, for the first time this season, Christian Chiruta making a return to the awning. The Brands Hatch Indy circuit is a short, tight and relentless track. It's only got 5 corners, but it shouldn't be underestimated. As with all tracks, it also changes its character depending on the conditions. We took the opportunity to look at the difference between a lap in the wet and a lap in the dry. And here's David Robinson to talk us around.
So riding on board with James Murphy in the 270R for an onboard lap at Brands in the wet. Looking at Thursday practice on this one, but looks like Sunday's race is going to be of a similar weather condition. Good exit onto the start finish and a nice useful tow from a 310 to go with it. We're looking for the 3-board there, under braking, nice consistent brake pressure, staying wide, trying to get the rotation a little bit earlier on so that you can then power through the bend. Much more grip offline than online on that corner. Druids, a little bit of a different story, but fairly recently resurfaced, so looking for the normal line, but on exit really looking to stay tight and make the most of the traction that's there. Off the line, good traction on exit. Now looking head up to Graham Hill Bend, braking at the kink and again staying wide, looking for as much grip as possible there. A little bit of a slide from James, but holds it well and onto the back straight before Surtees. Again, eyes up, looking for the white line, braking there and mid to 3/4 track width on entry. A little bit early on the throttle, pushes James wide and he has a little bit to deal with going into clearways. Holds it well, nice wide line, looking to get a smooth arc through, pick up the throttle nice and early and carry good momentum going through to the start finish. Nice tidy lap from James, puts him into the 104s and we'll be looking to see the 310s and 270s do more of that today. So we've done the onboard run with James Murphy in the 270 in the rain. Now it's over to Gordon in the 310 to show us how it's done in the dry. Up to 4th gear, down the main straight, hugging the slipstream of the 420R in front and looking eyes up to the 2-board for the braking point. Braking hard here, bleeding off the brake early and then throttle on at the apex. Little bit of an oversteer on exit, but holds it well and on the way up to Druids. Braking just before the bridge, dropping down into 2nd, looking for a patient exit on the throttle and a clean exit. Good strong gear shift and we're on the way down to Graham Hill. Putting it gently over to the right, early brake release, good momentum through the corner and we're already onto the back straight, heading up towards Surtees. Up to 4th again, turning in on the throttle, then a half lift as we go through Surtees. Again a little bit of oversteer but holds it well into the final bend, dropping to 3rd. Early off the brake, good momentum, power on at the end of the curve and we're off on a good run to the start finish. Nice little bit of slipstream. We'll see him edge into the low 53s with a very solid lap.
In the 270R class, Nilesh Palmer qualified 17th place on the grid, a little bit further back than ideal. Dan Halstead would start from 10th place, Chris Moore slotted in 7th. But it was James Murphy who topped everyone, pulled out a great lap to claim another pole position for the season. The race itself had very distinct phases. Initially, it looked like James Murphy might team up with Tom Allen and pull out into a lead gap. However, the chase group, including Chris Moore and Dan Halstead, managed to draw them both back in. Nilesh Palmer had a relatively quiet race and ended up finishing in 14th. Chris Moore got a poor start and spent his race fighting in a midfield battle, whilst Dan Halstead got a great start initially, but then found himself slipping back into the mid-pack, same battle as Chris Moore. However, Dan was able to recover some ground late on and ended up finishing 8th, Chris Moore 11th. Out front, James Murphy was never outside the top 3 and would cross the line 2nd on the majority of laps. DPR Workshop customer Dan French finished 6th, doing enough to clinch the championship. Great end to a turbulent season for Dan. The other championship podium spots were still very much up for grabs going into the second race. With damp and changeable conditions throughout the race, there were thrills and spills aplenty.
There's a big shenanigans in the middle. There's a few of them off, including Matt Shepherd, the driver that's second in the championship. He's off through the gravel, he's back on again, but that might lose him second place in the championship.
Early in the race, James Murphy took to battle with Graham McDonald, and the pair pulled a gap to the chase group. That group included all the DPR Motorsport drivers initially, with Chris Moore and Nilesh Palmer making great early progress. The mid-pack battle would rage all race long. Dan Halstead proved strong and made less errors than those around him to finish in 6th place. Chris Moore followed him home in 7th, and Palmer ended his race in 11th. However, out front, the McDonald challenge faded early on in the race, and Murphy strode to an imperious win, coming home nearly 17 seconds clear of his nearest rival and lapping the field all the way up to 12th place. That confirms second place in the championship for James, and considering the luck he hasn't been on his side this year, it was an absolutely stellar job. In the 310R Championship, Gordon Sawyer came into the weekend with a 6-point advantage over his championship rivals. In a tricky qualifying session and on a drying track, Gary Curtis took 24th, Harry Landy would start race 1 from 19th, Andy Perry 8th, and Gordon Sawyer would line up on 4th place on the grid. Christian Sciarruta, on his return to the grid, took a blinding 2nd place. Ahead of the race, the championship honoured Andy Sciarruta, who died early this year, allowing Christian a solo parade lap in front of the crowd and including his family. Unfortunately, it wasn't the fairy tale start for Christian. Poor off the line, he slipped to the mid-pack. With the pace of the race so high, he was never able to rejoin the lead battle and would come home in 9th place. Gary Curtis was again a touch cautious in the early stages and would then spend the rest of the race recovering spots to end in 21st, in touching distance of that top 20 finish. In the lead battle, it looked at one stage like McCormack, Sawyer and Walters would break away from the field. However, Perry got brought back to the pack by a charging Tom Grensinger, who'd hit the barrier in qualifying early and had started deep in the field. This rolled the dice with the lead positions, and Gordon was demoted to 5th place over the line. However, a post-race 5-second penalty for Perry for track limits meant it was 4th place once the result sheets were released. That reduced Sawyer's lead to McCormack to just 3 points going into the final race. And the final race was wet. Track conditions that both Sawyer and Sciarruta relish. Sciarruta quickly made up places from his 9th place start to take to the head of the field. McCormack and Grensinger were both struggling under the conditions, but did a great job of hanging on and staying involved in the lead battle. There was some early drama when Sawyer took the lead, but then proceeded to go wide at Druids, and then wider still at Clearways, including a trip through the gravel. Luckily, he was able to recover to the track and only lost a few places. However, it was advantage Jay McCormack at that point. That was until he touched a curb going into Graham Hill Bend and ran wide onto the wet grass. He would recover deep into the field and was never able to show enough pace to move back to the front group. And that front group was led by Sciarruta, who was proving the class of the field, and he moved to a 15-second lead gap. Sawyer ran 3rd for the majority of the race, but Swan Dixon was able to catch up and take this position from Gordon, who was very much in maintenance mode. Just when it looked like everything was all done and dusted for Christian with the win and for Gordian winning the championship, a very late safety car meant the field would all be brought back together for a single lap shootout. There was tension in the air all around the track, but although Gordon didn't make a great restart and lost a couple of places, it wasn't enough to cost the championship. Curtis had exited the race early after a brilliant start to the race had unfortunately resulted in a spin, a trip to the barriers and retirement. Andy Perry was unfortunately hit with some post-race penalties, seeing him place 17th in results sheets. Harry Landy came home in 16th place. For Christian, he had pulled out a 4-second lead in just a single lap by the time the checkers were shown, and it was a highly emotional part Fermi for him, his family and all his friends. For Gordon, it was a 10-year wait for the championship win, and having lost his brother a couple of years previously, another emotional victory over the entire season.
And our winner, what a fitting tribute for his dad, Christian Shirita! Oh, well done.
The 420R season has been a roller coaster this year. Every driver's had their ups and downs, and so, unusually coming into the final weekend over the past few years, the championship wasn't yet decided. In qualification, Jordan placed his car in 14th. A returning Ian Sparshot claimed a great 13th place starting position. Chris Bates looked like he would make Superpole for the first time this season, but was just denied at the end of the session to take 11th place. William Smith and Aaron Head both had very tentative Superpole laps and ended up in 7th and 4th places respectively. In race 1, John Byrne again took flight from the whole field to take an incredible victory by nearly 15 seconds, all but sealing the championship victory. Ian Sparshot had a poor start to the race and slipped back to 16th, which is where he ended at the flag. Alex Jordan would end up finishing 13th, and Chris Bates took 11th place, just outside that top 10. At the front of the field, Aaron Head had a race-long battle with Henderson, but was not able to get of Henderson, and a recovering Will Smith would demote him a further place to keep him off the podium in 4th, Smith taking 3rd.
Smith 3rd, it's now Ainscough 4th, Kerbal Fit, Higgins 6th, then Bates, Arthur and Sparshot. And incredibly, John Byrne to the front door, back into his 11th position. How on earth have you done that?
Race 2 was run in extremely tricky conditions, with the rain arriving just after the race had been declared dry. This meant that the cars would start on their dry tyres, which have very little grip in damp conditions. The start of the race was a scramble for everyone, made worse by Byrne making a very poor start and dropping deep into the field. Whilst trying to recover, he went off an additional 2 times, and at one point even the championship looked in jeopardy. The conditions would claim Alex Jordan as a DNF, and Ian Sparshot was definitely missing the track time this year, falling back to 18th place. Chris Bates also made errors on his way to 16th place. Out front, Aaron again battled with Henderson early, and again wasn't able to make a move stick for the lead. As the track dried out and drivers found grip later in the race, positions were changing fairly constantly and unpredictably. However, it was William Smith once more who came through the field late to claim the 3rd place podium. Aaron Head held his 2nd place to the line this time and also claimed 3rd place in the championship into the bargain.